Hello everyone and welcome to the History of the Batman episode 6. I'm here and I'm going to talk today about something that we haven't really, we did touch on it in the last episode, but now we're going to go more in depth into it. That is the animated Batman movies. And then we're going to talk about character origins, the villain origins and their evolution from the comic book to the big screen and everywhere in between. As well as, of course, the heroes like Robin and Batman, Batgirl, etc. But first of all, we're going to start off and talk about the animated movies. Now, we talked about the sequence of animated movies in our last episode, but we were more talking about the animated series itself and the different incarnations of the animated features from the Batman saga. But right now, we're going to talk about the animated features. And the animated features, the first one was in 1993. And that one was from, it was a depiction of the animated series had just started. It was the first season. And then they done this series that was a kind of a spin-off from the animated series, but it was in the continuity of that, and it was in the continuity also kind of the Batman the movie and Batman Returns. The film was okay. Mask of the Phantasm, you call it, Batman Mask of the Phantasm. It was good. It was well scripted, very well structured as a film. It included the Joker. He was the main villain, but then there was a more sinister villain that came into it. Well, how could you be more sinister than the Joker? But a more very mysterious villain that came into this movie, and that was the Phantasm. And there was a whole twist near the end of the film, and turned out the Phantasm ended up being someone who was throughout the movie a good guy or a good person in the film. Mask of the Phantasm was a very interesting film. Very parts of it was very downbeat, but you could argue that a lot of the Batman stuff was very downbeat, but the great characters brought into it kind of help make it more upbeat. But Batman Mask of the Phantasm was a good film, a good feature for the first feature film of the Batman world, and there has been a lot more since. The second feature film in the Batman world, Batman animated world, was a film that came out in 1998. And this particular film came out as a spin-off from the Batman New Adventures series, which was a 24 episode series that came after the animated series and in the continuity of the animated series. And Batman, the New Adventures, was out around 97, 98, and it was just after Batman and Robin the movie. So it was it came after these movies. They were the Joel Schumacher movies, of course, Batman and Robin and Batman Forever. And it came after Batman and Robin, and it was a good series. But now we're going to talk about the spin-off, the movie spin-off, which was Batman versus Mr. Freeze, Sub-Zero, which was a good film. It was very much continuing on from the episodes featuring Mr. Freeze, and continuing on from the film, which was Batman and Robin, continuing on the Mr. Freeze character from the film. And that was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, but always in the comics and in the animated series, Mr. Freeze was done a lot more seriously. It was not the pun, the guy that spins all the puns, but that was the Schwarzenegger and the 60s TV series, Mr. Freeze. But you have to say Mr. Freeze in the Batman animated movie Sub-Zero was very good, and there was a good story to that, and it was all very much about the fact that he wanted to get this formula to help cure his wife who was frozen and stuff, and that was very much worked into the storyline, and it was a very good film. After Batman Sub-Zero came The next one was 5 years later, the next big feature movie from the Batman world. Next big feature animated movie from the Batman world. And this one was called Batman, The Mystery of the Batwoman. And that one, Batman, of course, battles the Penguin and Bane. The Penguin was, of course, in reform. He had opened his iceberg lounge, and he was entertaining everyone in Gotham in this iceberg lounge, changing his ways, so to speak, and he was trying to make everyone believe he was this good guy now all of a sudden. And things would come to be that he wasn't so good, because he hired Bane to come in and try and take down the Batman. And Bane was, of course, the South American powerhouse, of course, and very much in the comics he was this monster, and then he was always South American. He was from an island in the middle between Central and South America, and the story went that he was, in this film, he was going to come in and try and bring down the Bat. And he was in some great comics. He was the only, of course, I'll touch on now, that he was the only villain that was able to break the Bat in the comic books, of course, in the famous comic Nightfall. But that was very, very, it was a good enough film. And then when that's all happening, the Batwoman, this mysterious Batwoman, comes in to help Batman. And originally, of course, when she comes into it, nobody knows who she's for and stuff. And it's a very good story. Maybe not quite as good as the series itself and the series that was before it, but it was a good feature and good to see it back after a few years' absence from the animated stuff in the Batman world. So then after, I called it Rise of the Batwoman in my last video. I didn't mean to call it that. The name of it is actually Batman, The Mystery of the Batwoman. Very good film, good spectacle. I enjoyed it. Next up in the Batman series, the animated features. After that particular film, there was a few more. Of course, the feature films came out then in the mid-2000s with Batman Begins. And after Batman Begins came out, there was a movie. It wasn't really a movie, it was like a montage of different films in the one disc. And it was like shorts, a load of shorts of loads of different directors and producers' ideas of Batman and the way they would represent Batman. And this was called Batman Gotham Knight. And I thought that was very interesting. Good DVD, worth getting if you're a big Batman fan. If you're not a big Batman fan, you probably wouldn't really understand the concept of it. But I enjoyed it, and loads of different different ideas for Batman and for the way he should, his approach and for the villains and stuff. Batman Gotham Knight, definitely worth taking a look at. There's been other Batman features since then. One in particular, well, of course, after the Batman Begins as well, there was a series that started. It was called The Batman, just called The Batman. And of course, doing the voice for Batman, and that was Reno Romero, as opposed to, of course, who was doing the voice before, Kevin Conroy, who was brilliant at it, of course, done it brilliantly. But Reno Romero came in then and done the voice for Batman Bruce Wayne, and he was pretty good as well, kind of a younger Batman, and it came around as well. Very good stuff. And I thought the Batman series was pretty good. It went for ran for five series and then finished up. But it's been good. Other stuff now I want to hit on actually is the Batman Beyond series. Batman Beyond series I wasn't too keen on. I mentioned that before, and I didn't really enjoy it too much. I didn't really watch it a lot either, because I'm not really into that idea of Batman of the future. But it spun off another film which was called Batman of the Future, which was very good. It was a futuristic Joker, a futuristic Batman. It was quite a good film. As I say, I didn't enjoy the futuristic concept of it when it comes to Batman, but it was great for people into that, you know. So Batman of the Future was another feature film that came out in 2000, 2001, around that time, and then of course Mystery of the Batwoman, and then as we go on, Batman Gotham Knight was okay, was good, as I say, for a big Batman fan. And then after that, lately more so, they have been bringing out, DC have been releasing graphic novels come films. Like they've been making graphic novels out of movies, and there's been some good ones. There has been, of course, films such as Under the Red Hood, which is very well done, very well worked into. It's all about it's kind of like two of the comics rolled into one. They touch on two different comic book stories from back years ago. One of them being the Death in the Family comic, which was all about the Jason Todd's Robin story from comic books, and he was killed by the Joker, and it was a very big event in the comics, and that was depicted in this particular feature animated film, which was the very good Under the Red Hood, which featured a lot of different villains. Featured the Joker in a big way, featured this Red Hood character, and featured a few others, the Batman of course, and really was well worth a look. Other ones you would, since they've been bringing out these comic book stories as films. There was another one in particular called Batman The Dark Knight Returns, is another one that's been brought out by the DC Universe, and it looks good as well. It's been brought out in 2 parts. I understand the first part is already out. I haven't seen it yet. It seems to be good. I'm really looking forward to looking at that one. Batman Year One has also been brought out as a movie, and that looks good as well. There are definitely 3 that I'm planning on looking at in the next while. Is Batman Under the Red Hood. I want to see that one again. It's really good. Batman Year One, and of course Batman The Dark Knight Returns animated movie, which also looks very good. But all these ideas really good. I really enjoy everything Batman, and it's all good. I want to hit on the Batman series that we were talking about. In that, there has been spin-off movies from that, including Batman vs. Dracula. There has been other spin-off movies from that particular series, and they are very well worth watching as well, because it is a good series. It's better, I think, than this one, Fear the Batman, which is coming out in CGI in 2013, I understand, and that's not exactly... I don't think that looks particularly good, but I haven't seen enough about it, I haven't read enough up on it and stuff, but it doesn't look great. I'm telling you now, I think if you haven't watched The Batman or the spin-off movies, you should have a look at them. Really worth having a look at. The Batman Year One story will be very good, I'm sure. I haven't actually watched that yet, but they always talked about, after Joel Schumacher done a terrible job with Batman and Robin, they always talked about making a feature live action film called Batman Year One, to try and, I think he tried to make one of these ideas, the Batman Triumphant idea. I haven't talked about it yet in this series, but I will be getting to that. So he was going to try and make that idea, but he also touched on and pitched to to Warner Brothers the ideas to make Batman Dark Knight, and the idea to make Batman Year One. And what he was going to do with Batman Dark Knight was he was going to make it the Man-Bat, Professor Langstrom in Gotham University was teaching Dick Grayson, who had retired his Robin as Robin outfit and decided to go back to college, as did Batman. Decided after the Batman and Robin situation that he was going to back down and not be Batman anymore, so it was going to be Bruce Wayne. And then what they were going to do was have Robin at have Dick Grayson at college, and have Langstrom teaching him and working on experiments and stuff. And then they were going to have the Scarecrow, also Professor Crane, who became the Scarecrow, was working with Langstrom and puts the fear toxins, involves the fear toxins and stuff. And they were going to have a whole thing with the Scarecrow and the Man-Bat, who Langstrom becomes in the comics and in this particular film and this thing. And they were going to have all that come together, and the Batman, Robin, Batgirl, and all were going to get involved, and it was going to be a good film. Batman Dark Knight. That was that idea. It would have been very dark as well. I think whatever Joel Schumacher was saying he was going to do, he would have made it really, really dark to try and make up for the campiness of Batman and Robin beforehand. But I don't know if that could have ever happened with him at the helm. But anyway, also I can tell you that the Batman Year One idea is all about the Batman origins and Bruce Wayne's origins as well, and that looked okay as well. I think the cartoon movie now that I was talking about is pretty similar to what the film would have been like. And also I can tell you that the Batman, the other film I'm talking about, that was of course Batman Triumphant. I'm going to talk about that in an actual episode dedicated to that later on down the line. But right now I'm going to talk about the villain origins. And the villain origins part of this episode, I'm going to say about Robin. We're going to concentrate on Robin for a while now. We're going to, but with Robin, it was a progression of a lot of different things. The character Robin was taken on by 4 or 5 different people. Was Dick Grayson, of course, and Dick Grayson then became Nightwing. So Dick Grayson then graduated to Nightwing because he was trying to rebel, and you can see in the episode Robin's Reckoning in the animated series, it depicts Dick Grayson's whole thing, rivalry with Batman that they have as part of the whole saga, and he becomes Nightwing. Jason Todd, who was killed by the Joker in that comic, Death in the Family. Also, then Tim Drake comes in, and Tim Drake was actually the next Robin. He was a young Robin. And there was, I think it's Stephanie Brown, you call it, this girl character. She was Robin for a while in the comics, but they never done anything with her on an animated series or in the actual films, but they tried her out as Robin in the comic books, and she eventually became Batgirl. When the Batgirl, of course, that we all know, Barbara Gordon, became Oracle. Whenever wasn't it something happened with the Joker, or I don't actually remember that, but something in the comics where something happened to her anyway, and she was injured and paralyzed, and she had to be going to a wheelchair or some machine, and then she used her brains and was on the Bat computer all the time, and they called her Oracle. But next then, of course, there was a lot of character incarnations and stuff, and different reimaginations throughout the comics and history, because there has been thousands upon thousands of Batman comics and spin-offs like the Robin comic and the Gotham Girls one, and all the different Batgirl comic and all the different ideas. But it's a great franchise. The other characters that have been changed over time was Bane, for example. Bane was the big powerhouse, as I mentioned earlier, and he eventually is now the character that was in The Dark Knight Rises recently, who was just a normal looking person. But then Christopher Nolan's idea of Batman was more realistic, so But then when we look back in 1997 with Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin, they didn't make Bane true to the comics at all. In look, he was more true to the comics, but in ability and personality and stuff, he was just like the Incredible Hulk. So they really should have used him the way that Nolan used him and made him intelligent and talked a lot and stuff, because that was a great depiction of the Bane character. Other stuff we can talk about, the Joker character was brilliant. The comics Joker, the evolution of the Joker character, always very good. There was a more kind of a funny style Joker in the 60s, and then became a really evil Joker then as the animated series came in, and then the Heath Ledger Joker was absolutely amazing, and the DarKnight back in 2008, and been so many great reincarnations of the Joker. And then when you think about the Penguin started, the Sturgis Meredith Penguin from the 60s TV show was very good, because you had it was a great role played by him, a very funny Penguin. That was a comedy, of course. But then as it went into the 90s with the Batman Returns movie, it was Danny DeVito, and they made him big, and they made him very much half penguin, half human, because that was the part of the concept of the film was the animal motif, and that was very interesting as well. But then in the latest incarnation of the Penguin was the Batman animated series, where they have him as a they actually have him as a high flyer. He still looks the way he does in the Batman Returns movie, but they have him as a very little small guy that runs about and flies around the place. So it's very interesting reincarnations and reimaginations of these characters over time. Then to keep things fresh and they have to reinvent everything, very much like other things in the history of them. You always find there's a lot of reinvention to keep things fresh and to keep on the different characters in future episodes. You can always look there at the there's been many great characters in Batman. Even the Mad Hatter had a bit of a change in the different way he looks in the different episodes. He's a bit of a lesser iconic villain in Batman, but he's still a very interesting villain. And he, of course, is the Alice in Wonderland. It's very interesting to know, was there a deal done there or something to let them use the same characters that's in something else? It's very interesting that, because as far as I know, the Mad Hatter didn't belong to DC or Bob Kane, but then maybe he did. Other things such as the characters like Poison Ivy didn't change a whole lot over time, but she became more elfin looking and stuff back like in the New Adventures of Batman, but in the comic books and in the original Batman movies, in the original Batman animated series, she was just wore the green outfit and stuff, and then in the computer game she looks different again. In the latest computer games, the DarKnight, or the Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. But even Mr. Freeze, he, of course, we talked about that earlier, the way he's so serious in the cartoons, and is very much Mr. Pun in the animated series, or in the Batman and Robin movie and the 60s series. The Riddler, played by Frank Gorshin in the 60s series, in the 60s TV series, and by John Astin, of course, was very good, very funny. Especially Gorshin, he was excellent as the Riddler. But then, as Jim Carrey done it in Batman Forever, it was absolutely amazing. And then, as we know, the next reimagination of the Riddler after that, we were hoping would have been Johnny Depp in the latest movie, but that never happened. But be very interesting to see who could pull off the idea of the Riddler in future Batman installments. If I've left out any of the characters, I know I have. I've left out loads of the Batman characters, but it's hard to fit them all into the episodes, but and to think up what we would say about them, because there's so much we could discuss about them. If I haven't told you already, I'd like you to leave comments below, just to say what you think of the whole Batman world, and just say your thoughts on the characters in this particular. Under this particular video, you could say what you think of each of the evolution of the characters and stuff, and tell me what you think of the animated features. We're going to now talk about the spin-offs, and in the spin-offs, the Batman spin-offs, you have some great stuff. You have Batman versus the Batman Superman movie, and then you had the Batman Superman Public Enemies, Batman Superman Apocalypse. Them three films, very, very good stuff. You have the Justice League series, also in the continuity of that. Batman the Animated Series, New Adventures, the Superman Batman stuff, and the Justice League Unlimited. And now Young Justice is the one with Robin and a few of the younger superheroes. Young Justice and Teen Titans are also, I understand, in the continuity of these comics, of the animated series and stuff. So it's very, very interesting stuff, the way they DC and Warner Brothers seem to keep it going over time, very much like the comics were. Now this visual media way of doing it is very, very good. Now they just keep it going, keep the ball rolling with the stuff. Very good for business, very good for people mad into this stuff. It's all good. The Batman world is stronger than ever, and in the next episode I'm going to be talking about Batman Forever, the movie that Joel Schumacher came in, took over. Very, very good film, and we're going to talk about it on the next episode of the history of the Batman. But for now, the Kyoster is here, and the Kyoster is going to see you all later. Kyoster, over! And out!
One of the great things about Batman is that he does have, like, as everybody knows, just about the best rogues gallery of any superhero, any comic book.
The villains give direction to the show. You can even call them the protagonist. They're the ones who want to get to this goal, and Batman's their antagonist, and he's going to stop them.
What say we have a little talk, just like old times?
We did get to spend so much time with the villains. We kind of got to understand, their motivations and their backstory, and sometimes that was the story.
Say hello to your new, improved Harley Quinn.
A lot of Batman's villains, they've planned something out, and it's pretty diabolical, and Batman finds himself caught up in this machine trying to figure out how he's going to end up stopping it, and doing so before anybody gets hurt.
We all have the good side and the bad side. It exists in every single one of us.
You're breaking my heart. Sayonara, chumps.
And once you can relate to it, it's captivating.
The Batman villains always seem like they're having a lot of fun.
There was never any shortage of good Batman villains.
You're only as good as the villain you fight.
Got it? Harley Quinn.
Right-a-rooney. Give me some sugar, baby.
She just began as a sort of a hench girl.
She was never meant to be more than just a one-shot character. Deanie came up with the idea for Harley.
I patterned her a little bit after my friend Arlene Sorkin, who TV comedian, and wound up doing her voice also.
Right-a-rooney.
And outside of Lucille Ball, I don't know who could have played Harley as well as Arlene did.
Look, piano.
And we thought, wouldn't it be great if it turns out she's got a very dark connection to the Joker? In fact, that she was his doctor in the insane asylum, and he kind of seduced her and snapped her mind. So I came up with the name Harley Quinn because that seemed very clownish.
Harley Quinzel. Rework it a bit, and you get Harley Quinn.
Looking at actual Harlequins, the thing is, their costumes are just covered with design work. And but the one thing that I did notice was the diamond shapes that they were covered in. So that was something that I was able to incorporate into the Harley design.
Harley's look was probably the least changed of all the villains. Basically, she was just slimmed down slightly, but the design in of itself wasn't dramatic.
She's someone who kind of loves a little bit too much and too unwisely, and that's her downfall.
It's kind of like, you know, the big dumb thug in high school that has the cute young cheerleader, and she just doesn't know how bad this guy is, and you want to kind of rescue her.
It's the most pathetic thing, but she works beautifully. You're laughing at her because she has a sense of humor about it.
She was the perfect foil for the Joker, where he couldn't resist being without her, but every time she was around, he had to sort of think about her before he would commit his next offense.
Somewhere deep down in whatever shriveled up little nut he has for a heart, there might be a little bit of affection for her. I think Harley is a very accessible villain, and I think she's maybe not as dark as some of the others are painted.
You immediately gravitate to her because she is, at her core, she's pretty innocent.
I think a lot of fans like that. They like that she is someone who can get out of danger with a smile and a little laugh and just sort of somersault away.
Face it, Harl, this stinks. You're a certified nutso wanted in 12 states and hopelessly in love with a psychopathic clown. At what point did my life go Looney Tunes?
The Joker.
Let the good times roll!
You know, the thing with the Joker is that in the long comic book history of the character, he started off as pretty much a straight homicidal maniac, and then they kind of made him goofier and goofier. And then he became kind of a joke.
Mother always said I had talent.
And then this time they brought him back as a serious, psychotic killer.
The Joker in our show could not kill because it was a children's television show.
Instead of him murdering people, we would have him give him that hideous Joker grin, which in its own way is almost worse.
I really have to congratulate myself on this one.
I never liked clowns. Yeah, they always gave me the willies.
Joker's the perfect Batman villain because he's the antithesis of Batman.
A bat in the hand is worth two in the belfry.
It's antimatter and matter facing each other.
I don't really know why he's such a perfect yin to Batman's yang, because the characters are really dissimilar. I mean, there's nothing, you know, historical about clowns and bats.
You're losing your edge.
Joker is the flip side of Batman. Batman's grim, Joker's happy.
The personal hatred that the Joker has towards Batman, the fact that he just wanted the limelight.
A countdown of victims that will end at midnight, unless our dear DarKnight stops me first.
Mark Hamill just nailed that part perfectly. When the second we heard that scary laugh, we knew he had the Joker.
It's actually really fun to watch him perform the character because all of the other actors are all seated and Mark has to stand to do it, and he gets his whole body into it.
You could actually videotape Mark Hamill recording the voice and use some of that for the animation. He is so articulate in his physical acting.
What made the Joker so much fun was that he didn't have anything really at stake. He just set out to do whatever he wanted, and it was more of a challenge to Batman to say, try and catch me.
It's time I capped off our feud with his ultimate humiliation.
I don't know if there's another situation in pop culture villains where the villain and the hero are just so white and black.
Mr. Freeze.
Some characters are, you know, there's not a lot there to work with in their original state. In the comics with Mr. Freeze, we had a kind of a cool name and a guy in a walking refrigerator. In thinking about the character, Bruce and I decided maybe there's some great tragedy in his life that basically killed him emotionally, and so he's just a shell of a man, maybe going for vengeance because he grieves for a great loss.
Our first design on Mr. Freeze, going back to the very beginning of Batman the Animated Series, I had contacted Mike Mignola, who's a really well-known comic book artist. This was before he became famous for Hellboy, and he came up with this really, really severely retro-looking Mr. Freeze design, which looked like this old-school-looking, almost robot suit.
We did a revamp. We wanted to tweak him a bit. Sub-Zero had been done, and essentially sort of took away his motivation by curing his wife. So we kind of decided to cut off his head and make him a robot.
So we thought if we were going to bring Mr. Freeze back again, we had to give him all new motivation. It became about the fact that, you know, he's separated from his wife now. You know, she's alive, but he's a monster now, and he can never be with her. So it became all about him just hating everybody and hating everything and destroying everything that everybody loves, you know, so they could feel the same amount of pain that he feels. I thought this was all good stuff. This was all good story material. So, and of course, we had to go back and redesign his costume again. And it's still kind of retro, but it's a little bit slicker, like we did with a lot of the revamped characters. We put a lot more black on it.
We're sensitive to him because he had love, he had emotion, he had all these feelings, and they were taken from him. And he so desires to have them back, and yet has no capability to actually feel them.
Up until the time we were doing Batman Beyond, you know, we were always found a different way of going with him, and it was always fun to revisit Mr. Freeze and see what he was up to.
There's no hope for me, or you, or your city. Everyone's going to feel my loss.
The Penguin.
Penguin was always a tricky one. He was one of those characters that, again, had a really good visual in the comics.
The Penguin can be a totally comical character. It's easy because of how he is drawn. He's so round. He's a penguin.
He's a tough villain because he's just a chubby guy, and even though he might be great with the umbrella and he might have all kinds of judo moves and all that, you don't feel that he's a great threat against, a physical threat against Batman.
Well, in the redesign, we went back to the original source material of the Penguin that differed from the Batman animated series and from the movie.
One of the joys of doing the revamp was finally getting able to do the Jack Burnley Penguin design. Kind of a 19th century British gentleman caricature.
I'm a legitimate businessman now. I don't want to draw attention to myself.
Ideally, you want to get a voice with character, meaning that the actor has a quality to his voice all by itself without putting on a cartoon voice.
I've been a huge Paul Williams fan, like forever, and he had just exactly the right vocal quality for the Penguin.
He was never going to become the dark and scary super villain that someone like the Joker would. So Paul's voice was appropriate for that version of the Penguin.
Living well is the best revenge.
He's trying to turn over a new leaf, and he's trying to pretend to everybody that he's a respectable gentleman of society now and not really a criminal, and of course he's doing all kinds of, you know, dastardly deeds out of the back.
We kind of felt like, you know, for the new show, because he wasn't the supervillain anymore, it didn't seem appropriate to give him all the umbrella stick.
My way would have been so much more pleasant.
But he's still a thug. He's still a criminal. So he gets to have a machine gun hidden in one.
Poison Ivy.
She's stunning. She's got a waist about that big. She's got a beautiful curvaceous figure. She's got a great face.
Pucker up.
But she was also a serious character.
Your hyenas have been watering my plants again. One more time and they're mulch.
In the original Batman series, she was played more human, who had a plant motif. With the new adventures, it was decided to push her more in the otherworldly territory by making her skin slightly green and making her more elfin looking.
Who told you to do that?
The first Poison Ivy sort of established the kind of character that she was, this vixen who just was plant nuts.
While she cares about plants, she doesn't care so much about people.
I think the stuff is wearing off.
Can't have that. Give him another shot.
Trouncing all over men's emotions and controlling them.
Time for a goodnight kiss.
A bit more of the plant gimmick got brought into her character, the idea of controlling men through certain lipstick and pheromones and basically being the woman that no man can resist.
Step lively there, Brucey.
About the only human being that she ever shows really any sign of affection for at all is Harley, and that's more just kind of like in a big sister kind of way.
Aw, gee, Harley, you broke our new toy.
There were some really strong episodes where she developed her own offspring.
What are you?
She actually created a bride for Bruce Wayne.
Why, Bruce? I'm your wife.
So you can do really bizarre plant flesh things that are really icky, but they're fun stories to watch.
She's an interesting, dark character.
Merry Christmas, darling.
Ra's al Ghul.
Ra's al Ghul was a big-time member of the Batman Rogues Galleries to comic book fans, but he had never appeared in any other media. You know, he'd never been in any of the cartoons or the TV shows or anything, so people at home didn't know who the heck he was. But us, being hardcore comic book geeks and really loving those original Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, Ra's al Ghul stories, we really wanted to do them.
He represents a break from Batman's traditional rogues gallery in that he's not really born of Gotham City. He's from overseas. He's a leader of a global empire of assassins. Nobody really knows his name, or they've heard whispers of it, yet the man is immensely wealthy, immensely powerful.
The strange thing about Ra's is he really wants to preserve the Earth. He sees modern technology and the way things are going as destructive. But he has no problem with offing as many people as possible in order to preserve the planet. And Batman clearly can't allow him to do that.
We didn't want to do any ghost stories, but with Ra's al Ghul it made sense because he's a very spiritual guy. This guy been living forever.
He's relatively immortal. He's lived hundreds of years and has a beautiful daughter that loves Batman. And that makes things tough because he kind of likes it too.
It's the ultimate temptation story, because by agreeing to follow Ra's, Batman can accomplish everything he set out to do: wipe out crime, restore order, and kind of in a weird way get his father back. But Batman is too clever to see for that. He knows that as attractive as a lot of that is, he can't succumb to that. That's truly going to evil.
The Riddler.
Hey, diddle diddle. Time for a riddle.
Boy, oh boy, the Riddler. What do we do with the Riddler?
Okay, here's this guy who's going to commit all these crimes, and he sends a bunch of clues to Batman, and Batman, bang, 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 figures out the clues and stops the Riddler from committing his crimes and hauls him off to jail.
It was hard not to make the show feel too much like the 60s Adam West show, where people are standing around trying to solve a riddle.
Everybody kind of has in their mind, they can't help it, they think of the late Frank Gorshin as the Riddler. He had left such a mark on everybody's mind as to what that character was.
He was brilliant. He, was the Riddler. But the thing is, his Riddler was very similar to the Joker's personality. And knowing that we were going to do that really manic Joker, we knew we had to do something different with the Riddler. We didn't want to just him be just a Joker clone.
I thought, let's bring in John Glover, because there is a quality to his voice that's scary. Just a little. He's the nicest man on the planet, but there's something about him that's a little bit scary.
On a pure graphic approach, we tried to keep him lean, cut, so that he could pose a physical threat if he needed to. We know we can get him into a fight with Batman, but are we going to be able to sell the audience on this riddle? Are we going to make it too complicated to where no one ever would have figured this out to begin with?
So it was hard to make a show where you could do that, make the riddle seem interesting.
And it's better if the riddles are like hidden things that you don't quite see, you don't quite know what's happening.
So we tried to make him smart and to offer the threat that no one was going to be able to outsmart him.
Yeah! Scarecrow. Scared you, didn't I?
Scarecrow was a character who went through a number of evolutions. Originally, the character was very cerebral. Jonathan Crane was a guy who was experimenting with a fear drug, but there was always something a little bit not too quite scary about him.
The Scarecrow should be kind of scary, and no matter what you do with it, a guy with a jack-o'-lantern face and Scarecrow clothes is not scary.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the change came about of the look. That may have come from Bruce.
He wanted to go from just making him a scarecrow to almost appearing like a corpse. And he evolved the most of all the characters. We got darker and darker and darker with the character.
So we took a really radical departure, and we kind of made him look, you know, we put the noose around his neck and kind of gave him like kind of Western preacher clothes and gave him like this, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Leatherface kind of look, and it really had nothing to do with being a scarecrow per se, but he was definitely scary.
He looked like a hanged man who had been cut down and you know, had gone off to terrorize people. We weren't even sure if there was an actual guy in the suit.
When we all saw that model, we went, oh, yes, that's it.
Fear is power.
On the redesign, I believe we recast him, and Jeffrey Combs did his voice, the Reanimator.
We all watched it come to life. We actually saw it come to life and said, that's absolutely right. That is how that voice should be for that drawing.
What's the use of providing me with test patients if you're going to lose them? You should have monitored him more carefully.
They just had him whisper, and that whispery rasp was so scary. They realized, you know, maybe we were trying too hard earlier. Maybe you didn't need that much. Just a really scary, dark-looking guy with the noose around his neck and a nice raspy whisper. Yeah, that'll do it. That's pretty scary.
Two-Face. Attention, people of Gotham City.
I love Two-Face. Two-Face was one of my favorite villains.
He's right up there with the Joker as far as Batman's key villains go.
He's a guy that is respected in society and a friend of Bruce Wayne. And he has a horrible accident and becomes a maniacal, schizophrenic killer.
Alan Burnett did come up with the innovation of actually giving him psychological problems before he even became Two-Face. He was already kind of having a Jekyll and Hyde thing even before that, and then the accident that turns him into Two-Face just really exacerbated the problem.
One of the things that we took from the more recent comic books was the idea that when Batman started his career as Batman, he had a secret ally in the city that was Harvey Dent, the district attorney. And so it becomes very tragic when Two-Face is scarred and he becomes a villain, because it's like Batman lost one of the true friends that he had.
You're too late, Batman. Better find yourself another mask.
It's not any radical departure from what he looks like in the comics. I mean, the one innovation that I've seen other artists, you know, carry on afterwards, which is kind of neat, is half black, half white. You know, it's like that's literally the character.
We just basically simplified it, changed the color of his face, changed some of the features a little bit, but the opposite sides of his personality are represented in color rather than a lot of surface detail.
It looked even better in the revamped episodes when he gave him that real squared off shoulders and the real sharp lines on his suit. I mean, he looked even slicker.
He still flips the coin. He still has the duality and the crimes based on twos. He adapted the best to the new design, I think, and to the new series, because he really felt very much like the old character.
I just think he's like one of the top 10 comic book villains of all time.
Order in the court in the matter of the people versus Harvey Dent. How does the prisoner plead?
Guilty. 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 Scarface.
That old sharp use, Muggs. Scarface is back.
Of all the new Batman villains they've introduced into the comics over the last, 20 or 30 years, the Scarface and ventriloquist seem to me the most like classic Batman villains.
Nobody pulls my strings, dummy. Especially not you.
You're not real!
That notion of the ventriloquist who doesn't even know the dummy is calling the shots fits right into Batman's world.
This evil dummy is coming out of his head.
The ventriloquist himself was so demented and yet played so much like your grandfather or your uncle.
Scarface and the ventriloquist are another set of characters where you have the option to hire one actor to do both voices or hire two different actors so that you get completely different sounds. Really good voice actors can do both of those voices.
George Zanza did the voice, and it was perfect. He did a wonderful job.
He was so great. He was so schizophrenic and wonderful. And people ask, is that the same guy?
Okay, dummy, yank the gag.
Yes, Mr. Scarface.
We wanted to make the dummy as live as possible, so we did have scenes where the dummy was by itself, Batman would sneak into the room, and he'd look at this dummy, and it seems alive. It even startles Batman.
The puppet was the real challenge, and yet he had to take care of the guy that was talking, so who does he hit, and who does he beat up, and ended up beating up both, which was great.
And the reason really is because we can inflict all sorts of hideous violence on the dummy. You can shoot him up like, you can cut him into pieces, you can do hideous things to him that you can never get away with doing on a person. Why would you want to?
I just think Scarface is one of the best villains. He's one of these villains that you're horrified and you laugh at the same time, and those are the best villains.
Arnold, don't do this.
It's out of my hands.
He's the puppet, not you.